Hello everyone, William Tramp, also known as This Effin GM here, ready for this week's installment of This Effin Monster. Last week we discussed the Aboleth, the most dangerous psychic fish in all of Dungeons & Dragons, and I was pretty excited about all the changes that came to that creature. This week we have our eyes set to the skies, and we're going to be discussing the first of true elementals to be presented in the book. Now some of you may be wondering, why am I making a video dedicated to one elemental rather than all four? Due to changes in the way that monsters have been presented in the 2024 version, I've decided to tackle each one individually. Plus, making a video about one stat block is way easier than making a video about four, and between you and me, I am not looking forward to the amount of filming that the dragon videos are going to take. Now, all that stated, let's go ahead and fly into This Effin Monster, the Air Elemental. As for base stats, for the most part, the Air Elemental remains unchanged, though there are a few noticeable differences that I want to highlight. Armor class, initiative, hit points, ability scores, saving throws, senses, and challenge rating, those all remain the same. The 2024 Air Elemental does officially have a land speed of 10 feet, which is a little odd to me, but I suppose a thundercloud slowly creeping along the ground is kind of a neat visual. You know what? Now that I think about it, the 2014 Air Elemental, if it found itself in water, it would be unable to move at all. Having a 10 feet land speed allows the Air Elemental a number from which to extrapolate other speeds. The 2024 Elemental also has a couple of updates to the 2014 version when we look at resistances and immunities. Now first, I want to talk about resistances. My least favorite mechanic of 2014 was resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. Most Dungeons & Dragons games that I've been a part of include magic weapons for the heroes coming into play at about 5th level and on. As a result, I found this to be a largely useless defense, and a ton of monsters relied on it. In 2024, this resistance has been removed and replaced with resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. Hard stop. Magic or not, the Air Elemental is going to be very difficult to take down through weapons alone, and I love this change. As for immunities, the 2024 Air Elemental tosses in thunder damage to its list. That's a nice thematic change, though not likely to come up very often, but it does fit the Air Elemental well, as the creature is often depicted as like a living storm cloud. Should lightning damage have been tossed in as well? That I'm on the fence about, but I'll take what I can get here. Lastly, I want to make mention of the languages, which have been updated to reflect Aron as being a dialect of the primordial language, but we saw that before on the Aarakocra. Now, the Air Elemental's singular trait, air form, has not been changed, though the language has been updated to reflect that the Elemental can move through narrow spaces without spending extra movement, whereas the 2014 version referred to not needing to squeeze. Squeezing was a pseudo-condition in the 2014 rule set that indicated to get through a space not sized for a creature of their size, a creature would need to spend double their movement. Now, I have searched through every chapter of the 2024 Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide, and the free rules, and there's no more mention of squeezing. So the new Air Elemental just spells out the effect in its stat block. And when it comes to actions, the Air Elementals has a few updates. First, the 2014 Slam Attack has been replaced with a similar Thunderous Slam Attack in the 2024 version. The attack roll remains at plus 8 bonus. The average damage stays about 14 or 15, but the 24's reach increases to 10 feet. Also, the damage type has been changed from bludgeoning to thunder. As a result of this change, the multi-attack feature of the Air Elemental now allows for 2 Thunderous Slam Attacks rather than 2 Slam Attacks. The Air Elemental's big attack, the Whirlwind, has been significantly altered in a few ways. The 2014 version of this attack allowed for the Air Elemental to force any creature within its space, regardless of size, to succeed at a strength saving throw or end up taking a chunk of bludgeoning damage and be thrown 20 feet and knocked prone. A successful saving throw would remove the fling effect and only cause the target to take half damage. The 2024 stat block swaps out the damage type again, bludgeoning for thunder, but also increases the damage from an average of 15 to an average of 24. Nice! But the 2024 Whirlwind also limits the size and the amount of creatures that could be affected, allowing for only one creature of medium size or smaller to be effective. See, an Air Elemental is a large-sized creature, meaning that it takes up on a grid a 2-inch by 2-inch by 2-inch block. This means that the 2014 Air Elemental could conceivably target a total of 8 medium or small-sized creatures with this attack, though the odds of having that many PCs that close together and stacked on top of one another is a little low. This also means that a lowly Air Elemental technically had the ability to fling Tarrasques and dragons across the battlefield. This is no longer the case. Now, in 2014 math, area of effect abilities assumed a number of creatures being affected when a monster or creature used one. In the case of a 10-foot cube, one could reasonably expect to get 2 creatures targeted for every use. So the 2014 air elemental was statted out to assume an average of 30 points of damage if the whirlwind attack were to be successful. Since the 2024 version can only target 1 creature at a time, this would explain the damage boost to the ability, though it's interesting to note that in terms of pure damage, the Thunderous Slam does a hair more damage if the air elemental were able to get a hit on 1 creature with both attacks in a given round. Okay, but how would I use it in battle? Now, the air elemental is a pretty straightforward attacker. It would seek to fight using its fly speed to its greatest advantage, maintaining altitude to ensure melee combatants can't bring their arms to bear against it. Now, the elemental will attempt to use skirmisher tactics, using their incredible fly speed to dart in, attack using their 10-foot reach to ensure it avoids opportunity attacks, and then fly out of reach, attempting to maintain a distance of about 30 to 45 feet. Now, I do not believe it is savvy enough to know who best to use the whirlwind attack ability against, and so I think that it would likely save its usage for whatever creature first makes a successful ranged attack against them, and that person would then become the air elemental's primary target. The air elemental also doesn't have any innate ability to reform on their home plane after destruction, and normally that would have me consider the air elemental running away when it reaches a certain amount of hit points, but then I think about what the air elemental is. Now, in the book, it's presented as an elemental force of nature, the embodiment of nature's buffeting winds and relentless storms. As a result, I don't know that the elemental would be able to comprehend the end of its own existence. As a result, I think the air elemental would fight until its own destruction. Now, what changes would I make? I do think it's a little odd that a being of elemental air whose pure existence is to be the embodiment of the wind does not at least have the flyby attack trait. That stated, I don't think it's necessary for it to have it because it has all that physical resistance. I'm also curious about the lack of lightning resistance or immunity, considering how much of the lore presented in the book shows the air elemental as being a being of both air and storm. But that stated, I also don't think this is necessary, but I don't think it would be too game-breaking at all to use variant air elementals that trade out thunder immunity and damage for lightning instead. Moving on from the stat block itself, I know that I am not alone in noticing and lamenting the choice to decouple the air elementals from other true elementals. Traditionally, or at least since 3rd edition, air, earth, fire, and water elementals were grouped together in the monster manuals, meaning when you needed one of those stat blocks, you would simply head over to the E section, rather than searching specifically by the element. Now, I'm not 100% sure why the true elementals were split apart, but the minor elementals, such as the method, were still grouped together, which is a theme that we're going to see a lot as this series goes on. Overall, though, you know, it's a really fast flying creature that's hard to pin down, and I honestly think they kind of nailed the stat block here. Alright, and that's it. That's the air elemental for the 2024 version of D&D. I think it's a great stat block, if a little lacking in excitement. I am a little surprised that this entry in the monster manual didn't also include the elemental Myrmidon stats, although I suppose that variant isn't quite as iconic as the base model, and they probably didn't feel necessary to include it. Now, I want to thank you all for taking the time to join me in discussing the differences in the stat block, and I look forward to seeing you all next week when I discuss changes to animated objects, magically infused constructs ready to sweep their foes away. See, that joke is really funny when you remember that one of the objects is a broom. Savvy viewers may note that I will be skipping the Animal Lord stat block. My intention with this series is to highlight differences between the old and new stat blocks, and the Animal Lord is a net new block that doesn't really have any equivalent in the 2014 rules. Anyway, thanks again for joining me. If you're so inclined, I would deeply appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button, as I'm working to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and this would really help me out. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you next time on This Effin Monster.